So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Pure Digital Passion Podcast with me, Moses Kemibaro. Today, we're going behind the scenes of Africa's digital transformation. We often talk about the visible infrastructure, the 5G towers, the undersea cables, and the data centers. But what about the invisible engine that powers it all? And every day, Africa's largest companies in telecom, banking, energy, mining, even in the areas of energy, are basically driving a deluge of digital content, whether it's contracts, customer records, technical schematics, regulatory reports. And this just isn't data. It's a livelihood of their operations. But when it's disorganized, it becomes a bottleneck to growth, a risk to compliance, and a barrier to innovation. So how do you tame this digital chaos and turn it into a strategic asset? And the answer lies in a powerful discipline called enterprise content management, or ECM. And today we have a true pioneer in the field to guide us. Joining us today is Fethi Amara, a senior executive at Planet Group International, a technology company with over 25 years experience delivering enterprise content solutions across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. But Fethi's journey starts long before his current role. He was part of the teams that localize or Arabize some of the most foundational technologies we take for granted, such as the Unix operating system, to the very first graphical web browsers like Mosaic and Mozilla. He even co-authored a book on the subject back in 1996. And for over a decade now, he's been at PGI, spearheading complex digital transformation projects for some of the biggest names in telecom, banking, oil and gas. Fethi, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Pure Digital Passion.
Thank you very much, Moses. Happy to be here, and I look very much forward to a nice talk with you today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fethi. Fethi, I was really fascinated by your early career. Like you, I started my career in the early days of the internet, the people who remember Netscape and Mozilla and Mosaic. I remember being so excited at the time because I was a young person in university and this whole thing was coming to Africa at the time. And you, of course, were involved in sort of Arabizing the foundational technologies at the time, like Unix. I even remember the UUCP for copying emails and so forth, and the first web browsers. And I think if you take us back to the 1990s, what was the challenge and what drove that passion to bridge a gap between cutting edge technology and local languages and cultures as you did?
Good, good. I'm going back to the old ages.
The
I'm
database.
I'm not a young guy. Yeah, very very nice. Actually, uh, if we go back to the 80s, late 80s and beginning of 90s, for people who were at that time using the computers at that time, what you were using were dumb terminals, and dumb terminals were dealing only with the Latin character. And when I say Latin, at some point it was only dealing with the English language. So the challenge at that time is how to make the computer talk your own language, how to open the computer to a very large community. So the first challenge was how to deal with other letters than the 26 alphabet letters of the English language, how to deal with the accents when it comes to Latin. Then when it comes to Semitic language like Arabic or Hebrew, how to deal with writing from right to left, how to deal with letters that can change its shape depending of its position in the word. Like for instance, in Arabic language, one single letter can have up to four different shapes, depending whether it is at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end of the word, or if it is isolated. So big challenges. But before that, we need to have a standard coding. So first of all, beginning of 90s, we started to have different codings other than the ASCII and the IPSIDIC that were used originally in the 80s and the 70s. And after the dealing with the new coding, ISO coding, at I would say in 1991 or 92, uh, appeared a new coding to deal with new languages, with other languages, and that coding was Unicode. And Unicode opens the floor to deal with the new languages. So the challenge was how to first of all, how to make those dump terminals dealing with the new codings. And it was not a big challenge because at that time, what we were doing is just creating the fonts and uploading the fonts on the dump terminals. And then came the graphical user interface especially on the workstation like Sun MicroStation, Digital Data General, Silicon Graphics, etc. And at that time, we started using graphical user interfaces on top of the X11 windowing server, so a kind uh, of Macintosh-like UI or Windows-like UI, but on the workstation side and on the Unix side. And again, the challenge was to make the application that were developed at that time usable by a larger community. So the problem is not a technology. The problem is how to understand the requirement and how to adapt the technology and solve challenges that were and concerns that were encountered at that time.
So I was just saying, thank you very much for sharing that journey back into the past, and more importantly, just giving us a picture of what that involved. Now, I think one of the most interesting things that I found when I was doing my research on you and trying to understand how we'll have this conversation is that you co-authored a book in 1996 on Arabizing the graphic user interface. And I think that's so incredibly forward thinking. And I'm just wondering, how does that early experience, thinking deeply about user interaction, accessibility, inclusivity, many of these things that now have become such a common side of what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion, for instance, when you're designing systems today, complex enterprise solutions for massive companies in telco, oil and gas, and so forth, how does that experience transpose to what you're doing today?
Yeah. In fact, you are referring to a book on international user interfaces by Jacob Nielsen and Elisa Delgado. And by the way, they approached us because we were working on the Arabic language and the challenges, but they approached other people that were paying attention to the UI to not only the user interface, but only the colors and the in fact the importance of what we call today localization, how to make a software adapted to a specific culture, to a specific region, to a specific country. So, in fact, what the impact of that experience impacted the way how we are dealing with implementing solution to the customer today. So, meaning that we have to take care of the culture aspect. We have to take care of the colors. For instance, some colors are only valid for some region, but not for other regions or other countries. So what makes me understand and what makes me aware of, uh, I'm talking about that experience, is you cannot push the user to use something that you developed without consulting the user, without understanding, without having an idea about the adoption of what you are implementing, what you are building. So, and this means that before any implementation of complex project, we need to gather requirements from the actual user who are, first of all, going to use the system, but at the end of the day, who also are going to accept your solution when you present the invoice to the customer. So it's very important to gather the requirement. Number one, it's also very important to build a prototype and get the confirmation from Mr. Customer that what the customer is expecting is aligned with that prototype. And once that prototype and the specification are approved, then you go to the implementation. And with this methodology, with this way of proceeding, you will have less risk for not being not your solution being accepted by finally accepted by the customer. So it's very, very important to take care of those aspects. Today we are talking about UI and UX, user experience.
In many ways, what you're describing to me, I think sounds like design thinking, right? You don't build out of isolation. You build from incorporation or collaboration with the ultimate end user or the beneficiary of that particular technology solution or product, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. The user is in the is in the middle, user centric. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And I know you quoted a name there that we know in the UX world. You talked about Jakob Nielsen. That's a name, in my company, in my line of work for the last 20 plus years, is a legend when you think about UX and user experience and so forth. So I'm so gratified to hear that these are principles that drive what you do today. But also,
Great.
after your time in France and the US, Fethi, you've been based in Tunis for over a decade. You've been leading PGI's work across the EMEA region. What drew you back, and what unique perspective does operating from the hub in North Africa give you on the digital transformation happening across the continent? I think this is an important point because even in my career, I've had the opportunity, for instance, I've done some work in North Africa in the past, places like Egypt. I've done work in West Africa, places like Nigeria. Obviously, East Africa is where I'm based, and I've also had the privilege of doing work in South Africa. And what I realize sometimes is that, you might look at Africa as a continent, but there's so many nuances and subtle differences between North, South, East, West. And here you are serving the entire continent. So, based on your time in Tunis and what you're doing on the continent, what are the things that have come to you in that time across the continent?
Very good question. Uh, in fact, first of all, I was offered an opportunity to work in my home country, and it was kind of dream because I that was not that was of course I was always thinking about coming back home, but I was offered that opportunity. And but I before making the move, I studied. First of all, I studied the to see will it be possible to do what I was doing at that time in my country, in Tunisia. And of course, the answer was obvious because we have a very good infrastructure from internet point of view. The second thing is accessing the resources, the human resources. So I know I'm coming from the public education sector in Tunisia. I studied and obtained my engineering degree in Tunisia. So I have an idea about the high quality of education in Tunisia. And we know a lot of people from Africa are studying in Tunisia and going back home to their countries. So meaning that I will not have a problem to look for resources, and especially in the engineering field. And then remember that Tunisia is in a kind of a crossroad from a cultural point of view and from geographic point of view between the Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And I was thinking that I will not have a problem to work in. It's like I have new horizon. I can continue working with the Western countries and with the US and Middle East market, but at the same time addressing the African countries, knowing that uh, at that time and even today, a lot of Tunisian companies are doing business in Africa. Uh, when I say Africa, Tunisia is in Africa, but are doing business in African, especially in the West African side and the South African side, and meaning that the with the new way of communication, it was not. I'm talking about the 2008 2009. We started, and I do remember that my first project when I started in working in Tunisia was in Rwanda, in Kigali. And I
Oh,
was
okay.
working on setting up a kind of portal for one of the agency in Rwanda. And I was surprised, first of all, how fluid was the communication. There was, from my perspective, there were no difference between the way I was executing projects in Europe, Middle East, or US, and the way we were executing and dealing with the project in Kigali. So that was a very good experience, and that confirmed to me that at that time, I made the very right choice.
That's wonderful. I mean, I like the fact that you're also doing work in Rwanda, which is quite close to Kenya, and also very much part of the regional story in terms of digital transformation. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about Planet Group International, the organization where you work. The focus is on intelligent content management, and I think people have different understanding of content management. If you're somebody in web design or building websites, we tend to talk about building a website using WordPress or one of these tools. But then there's this whole other area, I think, which is the enterprise content management. And I think for the business leaders who are listening here, can you break that down, to the myriad industries and sectors you serve? And what is the digital chaos that you are there to solve actually look for them, especially using this intelligent content management approach?
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned website, you mentioned content, but you mentioned also enterprise. So here we are dealing with large companies, large organizations who are dealing with millions, billions of documents. We are talking about unstructured data, meaning the content, the documents. It could be of any type. It could be, of course, electronic document, but it could be also audio files, video files, so any type of content. And the challenge always is to find the right information in the right time. So imagine you have an organization where you have several sources of content, several sources of unstructured data. And imagine the time you are spending to look for the information. Today, it's possible to use, like for instance, if we are using Windows system to look for a document through its name, through its content. But imagine that I'm looking more than that. Imagine you enter a library and you are looking for an information with regards, you are looking for a book that contains a specific information that you are looking for. So if you don't have the way to directly go to the specific book or books that contain the information that you are looking for, you will spend a lot of time looking for that book. So the same thing if you have uh, your content as an organization, your content is spread over different sources. So first of all, how to find that information that you are looking for. First challenge. Second challenge, how to guarantee that the content that you find is the accurate one, meaning it's the latest version. It contains the latest. It's an approved version because sometimes you not sometimes most of the times you have several versions of the same document. So in order to be sure that you are using uh, having the information in a kind of single source of truth, you need a solution that will manage that. Now, you mentioned intelligent enterprise content. So what the intelligence is bringing here? So the intelligence could be brought in different ways. So first of all, you receive an invoice, you scan the invoice. Okay, you scan it and you save it as an image. So bringing the intelligence could be by OCRing or recognizing optically the content of that invoice. Number one. Number two, if we go deeper in the intelligence. So I receive a document, I scan it. But what's the difference between an invoice, a contract, a CV, or whatever? So the intelligence here, the role of the intelligence is to make what we call the automatic classification. So the intelligence will automatically separate the invoices from the contracts from other type of documents. And when I say separation, so recognize it automatically. And after that, I need also to extract what we call the metadata, which are the properties of a specific document. Like for instance, for an invoice, a metadata is the invoice number is the sender of the invoice, the amount of the invoice, the currency of the invoice. It's different from a contract where metadata is the party's name, the duration of the contract, the amount of the contract. So once we have that automatic or intelligent classification, that's automatic data extraction, uh, we bring intelligence, and of course, the result of the at the end of the day is to rapidly go directly to the right information. One more thing: imagine you have an image and you want a description of that image. Take, for instance, insurance business. And if there is an accident, there will be a picture of the car accident, and imagine you have an intelligence behind that will describe what is in the picture. It will tell you it's a car of a brand XYZ, color is red, plate number is blah blah blah, etc. And it will tell you that looks there is a shock or an accident shock at the right side, front side of the car. So this will bring what we call the content enrichment. So on top of that picture, we will add more information that will help us. Of course, I'm looking for a car with a plate XYZ of an accident that happened during that specific period of time. So this is what the intelligence is bringing today, beside the fact of managing the content.
As I was doing my research for this conversation, apparently many employees in organizations spend as much as 19% of their time searching for this information. I think you really articulated what intelligent content management looks like, because it's not just, putting everything into sort of a database. You talked about structured and unstructured data, but also the meaning of that data, the meaning of that information, so that, semantically you can tell what it means and intelligently it gives you the response. And I'm wondering if that is something that most enterprises actually appreciate, that they're losing up to 19% of their time just searching for information, right? And how this
Absolutely,
solves for that problem. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. This is, in fact, there are different studies. Some analysts say 25% of our time looking for information, and the rest of the time processing the information. There are some other figures even considering more time in searching, depending on the sector, depending on the vertical. But yes, the all this content management, enterprise content management, intelligence content management is toward reducing the search time. As I said, remember the library looking for a book, the same thing. So because you would ask me, if we find very quickly the content, what we are doing to do during the rest of the time. So here we will spend more time to analyze. We will spend more time to properly deliver a result that has much more impact than something that will take too much time to get. So the less time we spend in searching, the more time we have in delivering a much better result.
To me, it almost reminds me of something I like to say nowadays when I talk about AI. I say, don't give a human a robot's job. And I always tend to think that software or technology now has reached a point where many low level functions, work that they call tedious or mundane or time consuming, now can be delegated to intelligent systems such as yours. Which brings you to my next point, right? You talk about enterprise content transformation and business process management, which goes beyond just storing content. And I want to understand from your point of view, what is the difference, right? Can you give us an analogy of how you turn a static document, of which I think you've described the invoice versus, let's say, a contract, into an automated part of the workflow, and where we move from just content transformation to business process management, which I believe is very much part of what you do in your platforms.
Correct. You take a very good example that we usually use when presenting to customer about the role, how to make a content, make it something dynamic, and how to showcase the importance of that content traveling inside the process. So if you, as you said, if you take, for instance, the invoice, imagine that we have a system, uh, regardless there is intelligence or not. I will talk about the intelligence later on. But imagine you have an automatic initiation of a proper process on an invoice by the time we receive an invoice. An invoice could be received in different ways. It could be received by email. It could be received through surface mail, etc. But imagine by the time we receive that invoice, we initiate a process to toward what? Toward paying that invoice. Because and in order to an invoice to be paid, it should go through different roles. It should go through a process. A process, in fact, is a set of activities that has a start, it has an end, and the activities and the tasks are split between different roles. So that invoice will travel through different offices, through different roles, different person, and each role, each step will add something to that invoice. So, and it would change the status of the invoice so that somebody can ask about the status. We can get automatically. If, of course, we have an automated process, we can know exactly where the invoice is. The same way, if you are tracking your shipment using DHL or whatever, you can know where it is exactly. So the same thing can happen to the invoice. And more than that, we can even interact with other system, with ERP, for the ERP. For instance, we have a contract in the ERP, and in that contract, we have different milestones. So we receive an invoice regarding one specific milestone, and consequently, we will update the ERP. So it's not only managing the vendor invoice process, but also interacting and integrating with other external systems. Now, talking about the intelligence. Today, with the agentic AI, uh, that process that usually handled by roles, by people, by persons, could be automatically managed by trained agent, and we will have an agent who will be trained on initiating the process, on qualifying the invoice. Will have an agent who will make the verification of the invoice. When I say making the verification, is comparing against the other source like the ERP or whatever. We will have another agent to do uh, some approval based on a level of approval based on the amounts, etc. So we can have today uh, uh, full processes built using uh, intelligent agent that will process an end-to-end vendor invoice management process.
Unbelievable. I can imagine the kind of organizations you're serving, the large enterprises across the continent. This must be a huge benefit just because, just looking at the invoice process, adding agentic AI, you said qualifying. And I feel like what I love about what you're saying is that it's all these things are connecting. They're not just working in isolation, that it's intelligent enough to correlate things across the system. But I want to talk a little bit about telecoms, because telecoms for sure is one of the biggest industries or sectors on the continent. All the mobile networks, the millions and millions of mobile users across the continent. And we're seeing telcos are moving away from just providing connectivity to becoming digital platforms, everything from fintech, entertainment. And McKinsey in particular notes that mobile data traffic is set to quadruple by 2030, just the sheer size of the data. And how does this data explosion create a content management crisis for telcos? Because I imagine with PGI, what you're doing there is sort of helping these telcos also stay more agile, more capable through the platforms that you offer to them.
Yeah, you took a vector or a sector where there is a high increase of data production uh, for both the structured data for the called data records, and also for the content because uh, the number of subscribers are increasing, the number of services are increasing. When I say subscriber service, consequently, we are talking about extra contracts, extra invoices, extra verifications. The number of frauds are increasing. So we will need more manpower, I would say, in order to deal with the content. We will need more storage in order to deal with that content. We will need also to more data governance. And here I'm talking about retention policies. So where to we have to give to create the proper retention policies with regards to the content that we are creating. Why carrying invoices that were created 5 or 10 years back? So we have to address all those challenges. We have to address how to deal with this large increase of data, how to deal with the less manpower we have and the more content we have. And as I said before, by introducing the new agents, you were talking about robotics, and the people hate to do the robotic work. So we can hand over to agents who will work round the clock, will never be tired. We just need to feed them with the electricity in order to make them running, and and this is the type of challenges we are addressing today. We are also talking about the enterprise, and this is the difference between the small scale and the large scale. And here we are dealing with scaling the solutions because the solution that was built to work for 1,000 users will not work for 1 million. So we need to have a solution, an enterprise solution, and that makes the difference. An enterprise solution could be deployed in a way, in a clustering way, in order to address the huge amount of content to serve the huge amount of subscribers of clients without having an impact on the performance. And to answer your question, by considering a scalable solution that will be able to deliver what we are expecting for.
Fantastic. So we're seeing a wave of innovation, especially in the enterprise space with AI. I think we've already talked about agentic AI already a couple of times. And we see that it's being used to personalize services, reaching a variety of consumers and business segments. But also, I think a lot of challenges come with compliance when you do this, data privacy, the security. And I'm just wondering, how does PGI help organizations innovate with new technologies like AI while ensuring that their core content is well managed and also secure?
In fact, those type of challenges are encountered uh, at PGI when we start with a new project. Usually, the customer will come to us, and the customer will ask us to help identify the bottlenecks, identify the area of improvement. And what we do usually, we start by doing what we call a maturity assessment. So we need, because when we start, we have no idea about how the content is managed at a specific organization. That maturity assessment will help us identify the gaps, that will help us identify the initiatives that that we can start with in order to leverage on top of those initiatives to the larger scale of the organization. So, for instance, if we see that one of the challenges is dealing with contracts, like for instance, the problem is the time spent in building the contracts and the requirement or the challenge that the customer is facing is how to reduce the amount of time in order to produce the contract. So And by doing that kind of due diligence, that kind of maturity assessment, we can identify the gaps. The gaps could be either a problem with the lack of resources, it could be a lack of governance because there is no templates in place, there is no procedure in place. So identifying all this will help us to start building or coming up with an initiative that will that we can start with, and that will be a kind of quick win because remember uh, we are going to make a kind of changement inside the organization, and we need to manage that change. So we need to identify the initiatives that will create an added value, where the user who will be that initiatives will be adopting the new solution. And if we have a successful initiatives, we can leverage and build on that successful initiative in order to go to the next level, to the next step. So basically, doing the maturity assessment. And when it comes to AI, today we are offering also the same type of AI consultancy in order to see how the company is ready toward a kind of AI change.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing you say is that you need to first of all get that baseline, understand where they are, and then you sort of come up with a bespoke approach that's going to actually be the right fit
Correct.
to ensure that the deployment or the proposition you're putting in place actually works for them. Great. So, Fethi, one of the things I also know about you is that in the work that you do, you're very much involved in the energy sector, engineering, oil and gas, construction, and mining. And these are really big areas in terms of the value of the business, multi-billion-dollar projects, amazing complexity, thousands of technical documents, obviously, behind that. And I'm just wondering what happens in such a situation if document management goes wrong? Yeah. And how does your platform ensure that from design to handover, based on the processes you've just described, that everyone has the right information at the right time?
So what happens? So imagine, for instance, you are building a pipeline for an oil and gas company. And in order to build the pipeline, usually the engineers or the constructors are using what we call a SOP, Standard Operation Procedure. And the SOP is a document that is usually approved. And imagine the constructor is using a wrong version of that standard operation procedure. And the constructor came to know only after 1 kilometer of pipeline. And you can imagine that the way the pipeline was put in place, if the way was wrong, so we have to do what we call a rework, meaning we have to remove what we built, or we have to fix the errors that we discovered afterward. So having a proper source of truth, a proper enterprise content management will ensure, will guarantee that the engineers will see only the last approved and valid version of of the standard operation procedure. Otherwise, and it happens, by the way, otherwise you are going to throw billions or millions uh, just because you were not using the correct document. So this is just one sample, but there are other, and I think indeed, sorry, there were big disasters that happens just because the content was not, or the document that was followed was not the correct one.
So what you're telling me at the end of the day is that, especially for some of these industries, I mean, which are very document heavy, it's a mission critical
It's
requirement
a
to have
mission. It
enterprise
is.
content management. It's not
It
even an
is.
option, is it?
It's not an option. You said it. It's not an option. Yes, it's a must. Absolutely. Yes.
Wow. Okay. I never thought of it that way, but imagine the wrong
I'm
document,
seeing you
the wrong
shocked.
process, things go crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So again, we've talked a little bit about AI, but I'm just trying to maybe get a little bit more detailed. In a modern ECM platform, which is the enterprise content management platform, is it intelligent search? Is it automating classification? What are the ways in which that you actually utilize or embed AI into how these platforms work?
Okay, I don't know if you remember the slogan or the quote back in the 90s. You dreamed it, Sony did it. You remember that? So imagine you have a black box, and in that black box will only execute what you are asking for. So imagine you have a black box. We'd call it an intelligence, and in that you talk to that black box, and you tell the black box, I need the process to automate the employees onboarding or the customer onboarding in my bank. Okay. And that black box will generate for you the process and I mean, when I say process, it will generate it in a way that is drawn in a standard way using standard like DPNN or whatever. So you will have the full process. I'm talking about the onboarding, but it could be the procurement or whatever. And then you start interacting with that intelligence, and you will say, I need for the at the initial task. I need to gather the requirement of the new employee or the new customer. So without saying what are the requirements, whether I need to gather the ID number, of course, the name, the date of birth. When it comes to employee job description, and imagine that black AI box will create for you a form where you have all the information that is required either for a new employee or for a new customer without telling that intelligence what you need exactly, because that intelligence was trained on different processes and knows what to be gathered for a specific process or a specific task. So this is today what is available, for instance, in a solution like CIC or Content Innovation Cloud from Highland, and where uh, you will be surprised at how fast you can create processes, you can automate processes, and how fast you can go with digital transformation. Because the problem today for companies who did not make the move to the digital transformation is from where I'm going to begin, how to start, uh, how many processes I have to automate. So here we are talking about simple processes, processes inside the organization. It could be, for instance, hiring. It could be leave process. It could be mission or application process, any type of process. And the system, just by stating the name of the process, the system will create the process for you. And of course, you will have the interaction with the system in order to add your specificity. Like, for instance, I want to add digital signature between that task or that step and that step, etc. So, meaning that the intelligence today will help us to quickly build automated processes, number one. And as I said, with the use of agentic AI, so we can have a process where we have the man in the loop, or we can have a full agentic process. So this is, I would say, the trend, but this is what we are having today. I know that right now in South Africa, one of the biggest insurance companies is about to sign a deal with by acquiring this type of intelligence that I mentioned just now.
That's fantastic. I think the opportunities are massive, obviously, because once this is embedded into processes, more automation, whether it's agentic or man in the loop, I think it's just really, at the end of the day, it's just really creating that efficiency, more accuracy, but obviously more productivity in the process for the entire
Correct.
organization. Now, Fethi, you as an organization, PGI, you're really a big partner with many global leaders offering solutions around, the document management, knowledge management, enterprise content management. And I'm just wondering, these partnerships, what does it mean for a client of yours, say in Kenya or Nigeria or right there in Tunisia, and to have access to these world-class platforms represented by PGI? And I know you work with a number of them, so you kind of, you work with different vendors across the board. How does this bring value to your clients?
Uh, in fact, if you see majority of the RFPs that big organization are submitting, usually they have in mind the solution, and usually they go through their homework and identify the solution, and usually they are targeting the leaders. When I say leaders, I'm talking about the magic quadrant of Gartner, for instance. So having a relation or being a partner with the leaders is a plus for us. It's a win-win for the partner and for us as an integrator, but it's a win also for the customer. It's a guarantee for the customer that we are dealing with the solution, first of all, that is coming from a vendor who is spending billions in R&D. Number one. Number two, a solution that have been tested heavily on different platforms in order to assure a compliance with the environment, the customer environment when it comes to database, to operating system, etc. With the solution that will there will be a guarantee that the solution will be supported by the vendor. It's important when you implement. We have a customer next door. Telco, who with whom we signed it for 5 years back in 2019, and customer renewed, just renewed for another 5 years, just because, first of all, customer is happy with the solution, but also because there is a vendor behind who ultimately will offer the support in case of any issue, any problem. So being a partner with leaders is a guarantee of sustainability, a guarantee of support, and a guarantee of good result and good work at the end.
Fantastic. I think also it also suggests to me that you spend a lot of time, possibly again across the different propositions you represent, where you almost provide a variety of options, meaning you might go to one client and be able to consult and tell them, we think that this particular one is right for you versus that one. And I think that's beautiful because for the client, it means you can almost really be that trusted advisor, recommending and not just saying, this is the one size fits all, but you can really give them a custom solution based on the requirements, right?
Correct. You are talking about the effort that we are doing in our pre-sales activities. I'm personally part of the pre-sales team. And the pre-sales advisory or the consultancy that we are offering usually is free because we, first of all, we either the customer is coming to us uh, looking for a solution or looking for a specific solution to a specific challenge or problem, or the other way around, meaning ourselves prospecting and going to Mr. Customer and seeing if there is any future development, in a future strategy to put in place, and of course advising the customer by of course being very transparent to the customer by showing the benchmarks. It happened to us that also we built uh, proof of concept POCs to the customers in order to see how far the solution or the product that the customer is looking for will be integrated with the ecosystem. Remember, usually the customer has different systems And one of the biggest challenge is to how to integrate a new guy, a new solution into that ecosystem. And the integration, usually it's a very challenging process. So again, going to the customer, consulting, listening to the customer also. Sometimes the customer is coming to us because he has a specific idea in mind, but after the discussion, after proposing, uh, the idea of the customer or the priority might change just because the customer will discover that there is a challenge or a concern that never thought that there is a solution for that concern, and the customer of course, after building the trust between us and the customer will go with what we are going to advise with.
Now, we're having this conversation here, right? And let's look at the broader African landscape where there's, to use your words, different levels of maturity, in terms of the kind of solutions you offer. And of course, there are incredible opportunities, but there are also challenges like infrastructure gaps. In some parts of Africa, technology, internet is still very, very far from where it could be. There's also digital skilling, people having the digital literacy to actually adopt the approaches, the technology, and really looking at your vantage point. Because I think what you do is you're seeing this variety or this differentiation across the continent, as it were. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, what's the biggest misconception that global observers have about enterprise technology adoption on the African continent?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is we think that Africa is far behind the Western country, which is wrong. And I will give you an example. Um, I was working in a project in Nigeria, in Abuja, exactly back in 2019, and I was surprised at how fast to get a mobile line uh, just by arriving to the airport. It took me only, I would say, easily 5 minutes, and there was a person at the exit of the airport with a tablet, and just by taking a picture of your passport and at that time, I'm talking about 2019, extracting automatically the data out of my passport, filling the form, and giving me the tablet just to sign and getting my SIM. And I compared, um, I do remember I traveled during the pandemic around 2021 or 20, and one of the Western countries, and um, I went through the same experience of getting a phone, a mobile line, and I'm talking about later to 2019, and at that time the operators, the telco operator who was offering was still using a scanner, a desktop, and it took me something like 15 minutes to get the same type of SIM cards. So yeah, we majority of the people do not uh, uh, do not have in mind that something in Africa could be faster. Uh, just one image that came to my mind back in 2009 in Kigali again. I If you remember the 100 USD laptop that were offered to Africa, and I was in the airport of Kigali, and next to me there were young people with those tablets, and I started interacting with them. What are you doing here? They said we are connected to the internet, and basically, at that time, they were, of course, young people are interested in football, and they were looking for the news or the pictures of their favorite football player at that time. At that time, I think it was Ronaldo or something like that. I'm talking about 2000, 2009. So, meaning that, like the mobile today in Africa, the laptop, so there is no magic behind the usability. We just have to be more imaginative in order to bring this. So from my perspective, there is no gap. I mean, the technology is not the problem. We can implement the technology everywhere. And you will be surprised, but you know that when you go in some organization in Africa, you you will forget that you are in a specific country. You will think that you are either in the Dubai or in the Silicon Valley, because the atmosphere is the same, the system that are used is the same, etc. Maybe the only gap is the lack of specialized resources when it comes to implementation. And from my point of view, this is the only gap. And this is why we are dealing with solutions that are easy to maintain, even easy to implement. There is a small challenge today with regards to the cloud. There is some reductance against the cloud with regards to the laws, with regards to the sovereignty procedure, etc. But I think by the time the adoption of the cloud is full, is accepted, we will see no gap, because we will not need resources to install or to maintain or to update or to upgrade. Everything will be on the cloud. Like for instance, you have today uh, systems like Google, like Gmail, like all the Office suite on Gmail, or solution like X, like Facebook. We don't need the deployment. Everything is on the cloud. So we just have maybe to develop skills for extensions, how to customize, how to extend a specific solution to a specific need. But beside the fact that the only challenge would be the right skills, I don't see any gap between what is happening in the Western countries or African countries.
Oh, great. The thing I also want to just add on that, the question around, Africa has that leapfrog advantage. We saw it with mobile technology. We didn't even have a computer era. We went straight to mobile. When it came to money, we leapfrogged the credit and debit cards, went straight to mobile money. And sort of the opportunity in Africa is that you can leapfrog legacy technologies. I even remember in the early days of the internet, we really struggled with the copper infrastructure and the analog infrastructure. And then shortly thereafter, we're using wireless and other technologies. And I think in the same way, when you do your work on the continent, there's this opportunity to adopt what you've just mentioned, a cloud native approach, where from the get go, we don't have to build our own data centers and servers when we can actually go straight to the cloud. Are you seeing this play out in your work, and are your clients more agile in adopting some of these new frameworks and architectures compared to, say, businesses in Europe or the US?
More than that, more than that, I myself find the uh, the digital transformation in Africa less challenging, and I will tell you why. Uh, because majority of the case things has to be built from scratch. Whereas if we take Western countries, for instance, if we want to go to the next level, usually we have to deal with the legacy systems. So luckily in Africa, if we don't have the legacy system, and this is the case, majority of the case, if we don't have a legacy, we have less problem. Remember that migration is a project by itself. An upgrade is a project by itself. Switching from an ECM solution to another ECM solution is a project by itself, on top of the digital transformation. So I would say it will be faster to have a digital transformation adoption in an African institution, like a bank or whatever. It will be faster than in a Western countries. This is my point of view. and based on several opportunities that we worked on several um, uh, leads that we are currently talking to. So the usually the problem is not the migration. The problem is how to very quickly automate a specific process. Forget about the backlog. Forget about the migration. Just focus how to start the day-to-day business. And from that point of view, it's less challenging than another project in the Western country.
I think that's really good news. I think any CEO or any leader of business in Africa, probably when they hear that from you, the fact that there is nothing to start with, and then now you're essentially going straight into the latest and greatest and most modern technologies from day
Correct.
one, I think it's fantastic. And you don't have the luggage of legacy, to hold you back from opportunity. So my next question to you is really, coming from all the experience you've had, I know you've worked with a lot of leaders of business on the continent and globally. What's your single biggest piece of advice for a CEO or business leader in Africa on what they need to tackle when it comes to their digital chaos, but isn't sure where they can start? And the digital chaos here, of course, is they've got all this content all over the place. They have no ownership. They have no processes. What is the single biggest advice you'd give to somebody in that situation?
Very good question. Part of the answer was in my uh, previous quotes. It's first of all start with the maturity assessment. So how mature the company is when it comes to content management, when it comes to process management. This is number one. Number two is start, and I did that. I think uh, 2 months back or 1 month back with one of our partners who wanted to use the solution internally in-house, the solution that we are representing. And we started with a workshop as part of our PSAs work, by defining a kind of roadmap and by creating a kind of steering committee and by identifying the quick win. What are by talking to different representatives. We talked to the financial department. We talked to the human resource department. We talked to procurement, which are uh, somehow the major consumer of processes within an organization. And we also uh, felt the dynamics and the enthusiasm of the different people, the different parties we talked with, by by going through questionnaires to identify uh, what is what challenges they are encountering, by asking questions like if you were a king for a day, what changes you will do inside your organization, just to make them talk and to make them understand what are the biggest challenges, and identify the people, the users, the future users who are eager to start with the automation. Uh, we need to avoid the users who are against the change, and have a specific treatment for that users, because we need to convince them. We need to sit more with them. But again, we need to start with the quick initiatives. We need to start with the processes that are very easy to put in place. Like for instance, talking to the HR people, usually HR people, because there are more in the cost uh, part, not on the production, not on the revenue. They are not producing. They are more uh, cost, how to say, consumer of the IT, and usually they are they. We don't find a lot of resources in the HR. We have a lot of paper-based documents, and and there are challenges that are when you start talking, when you start running a questionnaire with them, you will see that uh, when you start talking to them about a simple solution to put in place, a very quick solution to put in place that will make their life easy, they will be open to implement a new solution. So uh, as a summary, I would say is to uh, to have a kind of due diligence in order to understand what are the quick wins, what are the initiatives that we can start with, and of course the involvement. This is very important. I keep repeating it: the involvement of the future user of the solution, and in order to make them adopt and make them having the flagship of that solution.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those highlights in terms of, the method of how this actually happens, and really that all the stakeholders, need to be brought into the process and made a part of it for it to actually be successful. Fethi, do you have any final comments you'd like to share before we close? This is for our audience who may want to learn more about the Planet Group International, or to connect with you, or what is the best place where they can go see your organization, but also where they might be able to find you online.
Of course, we can find that, but before that, I would like to thank you very much, Moses, for giving this opportunity. We can You can find more information about PGI on the web with planetgroup international.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. Of course, I'm assuming that you will share our details on the podcast as well. Uh, uh, just a final word uh, to share is remember that technology is not the problem. So have this in mind. If you have an idea that you want to put it in place, remember that the technology here in order to execute the idea that you are dreaming of, the idea that you want to see working. So contact us anytime, and this is part of our role to of course, as part of the pre-sales activity that we are doing in order to advise you and in order to be completely transparent with the solution that we might bring or the challenges that we might address and that you are encountering.
Great. Fethi, thank you so much for telling us all about yourself and Planet Group International. I think there's so much value in what you've just shared in terms of people understanding what actually goes on with the work that you do, this whole enterprise content management space, which I think is possibly very misunderstood or people don't even know what it is. And I think what you managed to do is really articulate very clearly what it does and how it brings value. And I think also the fact that you've taken us from the early days of graphic web, to the future of AI-driven enterprise in Africa. You've articulated how digital content is not just an IT platform, but it's actually a business strategy for growth, efficiency, and innovation. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation with Fethi.
Thank
Wishing
you.
him and Planet Group International all the best. We hope we'll also see them coming more and more to places like Kenya and East Africa, where we are based. And more importantly, I think for joining us on this podcast, I hope you found value in this conversation. And most importantly, we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a good day, have a good afternoon, and have a good evening. Thank you so much.